a few minutes, which says, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended.
The silence inside the palace did not begin with shouting. It began with paper. One sealed document, placed on a polished table, changed the temperature of the room before a single word was spoken. Princess Catherine looked down, read the first line, and understood instantly. This was not a routine amendment. This was a challenge to the future she had protected with quiet discipline for years. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine did not lift her eyes right away. She kept reading, slowly, carefully, as if every sentence carried a hidden door behind it. Across from her, Camilla sat without moving, her expression calm enough to look innocent, but sharp enough to feel prepared. Charles watched the page in the princess's hands, and William watched his wife. The prince knew that stillness. He had seen it before, in moments when she was not afraid, only certain. The document had a name that sounded harmless: the Royal Succession Amendment Document, meaning a proposed palace paper meant to adjust how future royal authority, ceremony, and household influence would be handled around the line of succession. But this was not harmless. The amendment placed Camilla close to decisions that should have belonged to the next reign. It spoke of ceremonial guidance, advisory continuity, and future household powers, words soft enough for palace language, but heavy enough to change everything. Charles expected a controlled review. The king had gathered William, Catherine, Camilla, and senior aides for what should have been a quiet approval. No drama, no resistance, no fracture. Yet the room changed when Catherine reached one clause and stopped. Her face did not twist with anger. It tightened with disbelief. She understood what others had missed or chosen not to say. This was not only about respect for Camilla. It was about influence after William's reign began. William saw Catherine's hand tighten around the edge of the page. He said nothing, but the silence between them moved like a warning. Camilla kept her gaze fixed on the princess, and the queen consort's calm began to feel less like patience and more like a test. Charles shifted slightly, ready to move to the next matter, but Catherine did not let him escape the moment. Catherine set the document down. The soft sound carried more force than any raised voice could have. She looked across the table, first at Charles, then at Camilla, then finally at William. In that single pause, everyone understood that the future had just entered the room. Then Catherine objected. The word did not merely interrupt the meeting. It split it open. Camilla's eyes hardened. Charles froze. William leaned forward, no longer silent in spirit, even before he spoke. And suddenly the question no one wanted to face stood before them all. Was this document protecting the monarchy, or quietly handing control to someone who feared being left behind? But before Catherine's objection could be understood, the people around that table had to be seen for who they truly were, and what each of them stood to lose. Every royal crisis has its public mask, but this one had faces. Catherine carried the burden of a future queen who knew silence could become surrender. William carried the pressure of a future king, watching the foundations shift beneath him. Charles carried the pain of a father and monarch caught between loyalty and legacy. And Camilla carried something sharper, the need to secure her place before history closed its doors. Catherine understood why the document mattered. She was not simply reading palace language. She was reading the shape of the next reign, the future royal era that would one day belong to William, their children, and the family structure built around them. The Royal Succession Amendment Document, a proposed paper meant to adjust future authority and household influence around the line of succession, placed Camilla closer to decisions that should have been moving toward the prince and princess, not away from them. William watched Catherine carefully. He knew she was not objecting because of pride, jealousy, or old tension. The prince saw something colder in her expression. Fear that the future crown was being quietly edited before the future king had even been properly consulted. That mattered, because succession is not only about who wears the crown, it is about who shapes the rooms, the advice, the ceremonies, and the private influence around the person who will wear it. Charles looked from Camilla to Catherine, and the king seemed trapped between two loyalties. He wanted peace with his wife, but he also knew William could not be treated like a guest in decisions that touched his own reign. The monarch's silence carried pain. If he defended Camilla too strongly, he risked wounding his heir. If he listened to Catherine too closely, he risked making the queen consort feel abandoned. Camilla did not move at first. She sat still, almost too still, as if calm could become armor. The queen consort had framed the amendment as stability, but Catherine saw the danger beneath that word. Stability could protect the monarchy. Stability could also become a polite name for control. Then, a senior aide quietly reached for a second copy of the document and removed it from the table. The small action changed the room. William noticed. Catherine noticed. Charles noticed too, but the king said nothing. That second copy suggested the amendment had traveled through private hands before the family was asked to approve it. Catherine finally looked at Camilla and asked who had approved the wording before William was informed. The question landed like a door closing. Camilla's calm expression cracked for the first time. Her lips tightened. Her eyes shifted toward Charles, then back to the princess. She had expected resistance, perhaps, but not that question. Not so directly. William leaned forward, and the prince's silence became heavier than speech. Catherine had pulled the hidden thread, and now everyone could feel the fabric beginning to tear. And that trigger was not buried in law, protocol, or palace paperwork. It began with one ceremony that left Camilla feeling publicly diminished. Long before Catherine objected, one moment had already changed everything. It happened not in a courtroom, not in parliament, and not during some grand constitutional debate. It happened during the Windsor Succession Council rehearsal, when a seating decision became a wound, a glance became a warning, and Camilla realized that the next reign might not leave room for the influence she believed she had earned. Camilla had walked into that rehearsal expecting respect. The Windsor Succession Council rehearsal was a private practice meeting for the royal transition process, where roles, seating, movement, and authority were tested before any future ceremony. It mattered, because these rehearsals were not just about chairs and order. They showed who would stand closest to power when the crown moved forward, and who would quietly be moved away. Catherine was placed beside William in the central advisory position. The princess did not ask for the placement, but she understood what it meant. William stood as the future king, and Catherine stood as the future queen beside him, close to the center of the next reign. That position carried meaning, because it told every courtier in the room that the monarchy's future was already forming around them. Camilla felt the change before anyone explained it. A courtier stepped toward her chair, lowered his voice, and moved her one seat farther back in front of senior staff. The queen consort smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. She kept her posture steady, yet something inside her hardened. She had spent years proving she belonged near Charles, and now the room seemed to be preparing for a day when her influence would no longer matter. Catherine noticed. The princess saw the small shift, the fixed smile, the silence that followed. Later, in a private conversation recorded in William's household notes, Catherine told the prince she feared Camilla would not accept being slowly moved away from the future crown. William listened carefully, because he knew his wife did not speak like that lightly. When Catherine worried, she had already seen something real. Camilla did not forget that rehearsal. After it ended, the queen consort requested a private legal review of what one aide called continuity protections. The phrase sounded calm, but it meant possible safeguards for her future role, her access, and her advisory place after Charles's reign weakened or passed into transition. That mattered, because those same words later appeared inside the amendment Catherine would challenge. Charles was told the review was harmless. The king accepted it as a way to protect peace, not provoke war. But William was not informed. The prince remained outside the discussion until the final document appeared before him, polished, sealed, and already shaped by private hands. Catherine connected it all in one cold moment. The moved chair, Camilla's wounded pride, the quiet legal review, the hidden language. What began as a small ceremonial adjustment had become the seed of a much larger fight. What began with a chair being moved now demanded words spoken face to face, and Catherine was no longer willing to soften them. The confrontation did not explode all at once. It tightened slowly, breath by breath. Catherine placed both hands on the table, not dramatically, not theatrically, but with the unmistakable firmness of someone drawing a line. Camilla sat opposite her, composed and cold. Charles lowered his eyes. William stayed silent. Then Catherine spoke the words no one in that room could ignore. "This cannot pass as written." Catherine did not raise her voice after that. She did not need to. The private palace consultation room had become the place where the family could no longer hide behind polished phrases. A consultation room, in simple terms, is where senior royals and trusted officials review sensitive decisions before they move forward. This mattered because the amendment was no longer just paper. It had become a test of who could shape the next reign before William ever reached the throne. Charles asked for calm, but the king's request only made the silence heavier. Catherine looked at him and made it clear that calm was not the issue. The problem was reach. The document reached beyond ceremony. It reached beyond respect. It reached into future authority, future influence, and the private space around William's reign. That was why the princess refused to treat it like a simple household adjustment. William stayed quiet, but the prince was listening to every word. Catherine's control broke only when she mentioned George, Charlotte, and Louis. She said their future could not be surrounded by hidden power struggles, disguised as stability. Her emotion showed there, not as weakness, but as warning. She was not fighting for status. She was fighting so her children would one day inherit clarity, not confusion. Camilla's face hardened. The queen consort answered with wounded pride, saying she had stood beside Charles through storms, judgment, and years of public doubt. She said she would not be treated as temporary, not after everything she had carried beside the king. Her words were quiet, but they cut deeply. Camilla wanted recognition. Catherine wanted boundaries. Charles heard both, and neither gave him peace. Catherine then pointed to the most dangerous clause. It mentioned transitional family authority, meaning a proposed advisory role during the period when power moves from one reign to the next. William immediately demanded an explanation. The prince understood why that phrase mattered. If Camilla could advise during that transition, then she could remain close to decisions that belonged to the future king and his household. A palace secretary finally spoke. In a documented account prepared for the royal file, the secretary admitted the wording had been revised twice after the Windsor rehearsal. Each revision made Camilla's role appear stronger, more permanent and more difficult to question. Catherine looked at William then, and the prince knew she had been right from the beginning. Charles closed the folder. The king did not sign. He did not defend. He did not decide. That silence felt like judgment and surrender at the same time. Camilla looked away. Catherine remained still. William watched his father, waiting for the answer that did not come. Because behind Catherine's objection stood a more dangerous question: who actually had the authority to decide the monarchy's future? Power inside a palace rarely announces itself. It sits in pauses, signatures, locked drawers, and the hesitation before a monarch lifts a pen. Charles had the crown, the title, and the final desk. But William had the future, Catherine had the warning, and Camilla had a document that could not survive daylight without explanation. In that moment, Authority became a battlefield, hidden under royal manners. Charles knew the decision now belonged to him. The king could authorize the amendment, meaning he could approve the proposed changes and allow them to move forward through the palace system. That mattered because no one else at the table could make the document official. Yet William's place as heir, the person next in line to the throne, made his silence impossible to treat as agreement. The future king could not be pushed aside in a matter touching his own reign. Catherine had no need to pretend she held the pen. The princess did not have formal lawmaking power, but her warning carried weight, because William trusted her judgment, and the future royal household would one day be shaped around them both. That mattered because monarchy is not only built by signatures. It is built by loyalty, confidence, and the people closest to the crown when pressure arrives. Charles sat alone after the meeting with the document open again. The king read the same lines slowly, then stopped at the clause Catherine had challenged. He lifted his pen once, held it above the page, and lowered it without signing. The monarch looked older in that pause. If he approved the document, he risked breaking trust with William. If he rejected it, he risked wounding Camilla in a way no private apology could fully repair. Camilla waited in another room, tense and wounded. The queen consort understood what hesitation meant. Charles had not dismissed Catherine. He had not defended the amendment with royal force. He had slowed it, and that delay told Camilla that the princess had succeeded in making the king doubt what had once seemed certain. For Camilla, the pain was not only political, it was personal. She felt herself being judged, as if her loyalty had become ambition. William discovered the deeper insult soon after. The prince learned through a documented note from his private office that the earlier draft had not reached his team until the final review stage. That mattered because his own reign was being discussed before he was fully included. His mistrust deepened, not because Catherine had warned him, but because the paper trail now proved she had reason to worry. A handwritten note attached to an earlier draft changed the meaning of everything. It referred to Camilla's continuity role, a phrase that meant protecting her advisory place if Charles became less active, or if the monarchy entered transition. The words were quiet, but their purpose was loud. The queen consort was not just asking to be respected beside the king. She was asking to remain close to power after the future had begun moving toward William. Charles refused to sign immediately. The king closed the folder, locked the draft away, and left the decision hanging over everyone. That refusal created the first real fracture. Camilla felt exposed. Catherine felt confirmed. William felt betrayed. And by morning, the palace woke to closed doors, cancelled briefings, and the unmistakable feeling that something private had become impossible to contain. By sunrise, the palace no longer felt calm. Aides moved faster. Phones were answered in lowered voices. Doors that were usually open remained shut. The amendment had not been announced, yet its shadow had already spread. Catherine had objected once, but the consequences multiplied everywhere. Camilla felt betrayed. William felt excluded. Charles felt cornered. And the monarchy's private machinery began to shake. Charles acted before the pressure could turn into panic. The king froze the amendment's approval, meaning he stopped the document from moving forward until every challenged clause could be reviewed again. That mattered, because a freeze was not a rejection, but it was not support either. It told everyone that Catherine's objection had reached the highest level. It also told Camilla that the certainty she thought she had was already slipping. William's office demanded answers. The prince's team requested a written explanation of why succession-related language had been drafted without earlier consultation. Succession-related language means wording that touches the order, authority, or future structure around the next reign. That mattered because William was not a distant observer. He was the future king. If his own office had been kept outside the process, then the issue was no longer only emotional. It was a breach of trust. Camilla sat alone after breakfast. wounded in a way pride could not hide. The queen consort pushed away her tray untouched, as if even the smallest normal routine had become impossible. She believed Catherine had turned the family against her. She believed the princess had taken one clause and made it sound like a threat. Yet beneath that hurt, Camilla knew the deeper fear. If Charles hesitated now, then William's future court might one day close around Catherine, instead of leaving space for her. Catherine remained quiet, but the quiet was not weakness. The princess told William that opposing the document had been painful, especially because Charles was trapped in the middle. But she also told the prince that allowing it would be worse. Their children needed a future without hidden influence pressing against them. Their reign needed clean lines. Their family needed trust before duty hardened into resentment. A palace aide then discovered something worse. A parallel briefing note had been prepared for select courtiers, presenting the amendment as nearly approved before the family had fully debated it. The note, later referenced in a documented internal account, made the situation look less like a review and more like a decision already moving in secret. Catherine's warning no longer sounded dramatic. It sounded accurate. Charles reacted sharply. The king ordered every copy of that briefing note returned, and the command traveled through the palace like a warning bell. He rarely moved that way unless a private matter had become dangerous. Camilla heard about the order and went still. William heard about it and grew colder. Catherine heard about it and said nothing, because the silence proved enough. The fallout had begun, but the true turning point was not in the papers. It was not in the offices. It was not in the sealed folders. It came when William and Catherine finally stepped away from every title, every aid, and every careful palace phrase. Away from aids, titles, and palace language, the future king and queen had to decide what they were truly willing to defend. The most important conversation happened without witnesses, no courtiers, no lawyers, no carefully prepared palace phrases. Just William and Catherine behind a closed door, facing the truth neither of them could avoid. The amendment was not only about Camilla, it was about whether the next reign would begin with clarity or compromise. Catherine had objected in public silence. Now she needed William to choose beside her. William knew this moment was bigger than one document. The approval freeze had stopped Camilla's amendment for the moment, but it had not solved the wound beneath it. An approval freeze simply meant Charles had paused the document before making it official. That mattered, because the pause gave the prince and princess one chance to speak clearly before the king decided whether to protect peace or protect the future. Catherine did not attack Camilla in that private conversation. The princess chose her words carefully because she knew the queen consort was not only a rival in this moment, she was also Charles's wife, and that made every sentence dangerous. Still, Catherine reminded William that monarchy survives through trust. If future authority could be rewritten behind closed doors, then trust would not survive the next reign. It would enter already damaged. William admitted what he had been holding back. The prince felt anger at being excluded from language that touched his own future. But beneath the anger sat something sadder. He was hurt that Charles had allowed the matter to reach this point. The king had always spoken about duty, continuity, and family unity. Yet now William felt as though his own father had let others shape the edges of his reign before he had even stepped into it. Catherine softened then. The princess told William she did not want to humiliate Camilla. She did not want the queen consort publicly broken or privately shamed. But Catherine also said she would not allow confusion to surround George, Charlotte, and Louis. Their children deserved a future where the lines were clean, where loyalty was not tested by hidden clauses, and where no one could use palace language to blur who held responsibility. William listened, and something in him settled. The prince no longer saw Catherine's objection as a lonely stand. He saw it as the first honest act, in a room full of careful silence. That mattered because his support would change everything. Once William stood beside her, the palace could not dismiss the objection as tension between two women. It became a warning from the future king himself. William made his decision. In a direct written objection prepared for Charles and preserved in a private household record, the prince demanded removal of the Transitional Authority Clause. That clause meant the part of the amendment giving Camilla an advisory role during the shift from one reign to the next. He also demanded full disclosure of who shaped the final draft before his office was informed. Catherine watched him finish the letter, and the princess understood the cost. William was not only challenging Camilla's amendment, he was confronting Charles's hesitation. The prince signed because silence had already done enough damage. He signed because the next reign could not begin with shadows. With William now aligned with Catherine, the palace could no longer call this personal tension. It had become a royal rupture with a clear message. The future king and queen were standing together, and once the public sensed even a glimpse of that fracture, the story escaped the palace walls with stunning force. The public did not need every detail to feel the shock. Britain has learned to read royal silence like a second language. A cancelled appearance, a delayed statement, a car leaving the palace at the wrong hour, each detail became part of a larger story. By midday, Catherine's objection had transformed from a private family crisis into a national symbol of resistance, loyalty, and fear. Catherine stepped into public view, carrying the weight of a decision she had never wanted to make. The palace issued a brief statement saying succession-related household procedures were under review, meaning the internal rules and roles around the future monarchy were being checked again before moving forward. That careful wording mattered, because it confirmed enough without explaining everything. It told the country something serious had happened, while refusing to say how deep the fracture truly went. William remained close to the center of the story, even without speaking. Broadcasters framed the crisis as a battle between continuity under Camilla and stability under the prince and princess. Continuity sounded respectful, but many understood what it meant in this moment, keeping Camilla's influence alive beyond the present reign. Stability sounded quieter, but it carried Catherine's message clearly. The next chapter needed clean authority, not hidden pressure. Catherine was seen leaving a private engagement, with her face composed and her posture steady. The princess smiled when she had to, but those close enough noticed the smile did not reach her eyes. She looked calm, yet the calm had a cost. She had protected the future, but protection had placed her against Camilla, against palace silence, and dangerously close to Charles's deepest conflict. Camilla disappeared from the schedule just as the public began watching every movement. The queen consort cancelled a planned appearance, and the empty chair bearing her place card became the image people remembered. She was not there to explain herself. She was not there to soften the story. Her absence spoke in a language no palace statement could control, and the silence around her became louder than any denial. One London newspaper captured the mood with brutal simplicity. Its front page showed two closed palace gates beneath the headline, "Catherine draws the line." The image spread fast because it gave the public a single symbol for everything they sensed, but had not been told. Catherine had objected. William had stood with her. Camilla had been stopped. Charles now had to choose. A small crowd gathered outside Buckingham Palace as cameras lined the pavement. Some held flowers for Catherine. Others stood quietly, waiting for movement behind the gates. No one needed a full explanation to understand the feeling in the air. The monarchy had survived many storms, but this one felt different because it came from inside the family's own future. Charles could no longer delay. The king understood that public feeling had turned the amendment into something larger than a private paper. It had become a test of trust. If he protected Camilla too far, he risked losing William and Catherine. If he listened to the future king and queen, he would wound the woman beside him. By the time the family gathered again, the document was no longer just an amendment. It was a test of what kind of monarchy would survive. In the end, the monarchy did not break because Catherine objected. It steadied because she refused to pretend. The final decision came quietly, without triumph, without applause, without a public victory speech. Charles returned to the document, removed the clause that had caused the crisis, and accepted what everyone in the room finally understood. The future could not be protected by secrecy. Charles ordered the Royal Succession Amendment document to be revised. The document, in plain words, was a proposed palace paper meant to adjust future authority, ceremony, and household influence around the line of succession. That mattered, because Catherine and William had not challenged a small detail. They had challenged a clause that could have kept Camilla close to decisions belonging to the next reign. Camilla retained her dignity, but the queen consort lost the part that mattered most. Her ceremonial standing remained untouched, meaning her public respect, royal place, and formal role beside Charles were not removed. But her proposed continuing influence over future succession-related household decisions was formally withdrawn. That mattered because the palace was drawing a line between respect for the present and control over the future. Catherine felt relief, not victory. The princess understood the cost of what she had done. She had objected to Camilla in front of Charles. She had forced William to confront the hidden shape of his own future. She had turned one sealed document into a family reckoning. Yet Catherine also knew that silence would have cost more. If she had stayed quiet, confusion could have followed her children into the next reign. Camilla accepted the decision without protest. The queen consort remained still, wounded but aware that pushing further would make her look like a rival to William and Catherine, not a guardian of Charles's peace. Her silence was painful because it carried defeat without spectacle. She had wanted security. Instead, she had been shown the limit of her influence. William's written objection remained sealed inside the private record, but its effect could not be hidden. The prince had made it clear through that letter that the monarchy's future could not be shaped without the heir and his wife. Charles understood the message. The king could protect Camilla's dignity, but he could not allow the next reign to begin under a shadow of secret pressure. The final revised document became something different. It no longer centered on Camilla's continuity role. It centered on trust, clean authority, and a peaceful transfer between reigns. Catherine had not destroyed Camilla. She had not defeated Charles. She had forced the family to choose transparency over quiet control. This moment proved Catherine was no longer only a graceful figure beside the throne. The princess had become one of its guardians. For William, it confirmed that she would stand beside him when the room turned cold. For Camilla, it marked the painful limit of power. For Charles, it was a reminder that love, loyalty, and legacy cannot always be protected by the same signature. And for the monarchy itself, the verdict was final. The future belongs to those willing to defend it before it is too late. The document was rewritten, the room emptied, and the crown moved forward changed, wounded, but finally clear about who would protect its next chapter. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.